nombre del Señor Jesucristo. Amén. Gloria al nombre del Señor. Un saludo cariñoso en el amor de Cristo Jesús a todas las personas que nos están viendo, nos van a estar viendo durante este mensaje. Que la paz de Dios sea con ustedes.
As always, a warm welcome to everybody that's listening to us online. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you'll stay the entire message because there's a blessing in store for you.
Personas del Perú, de Colombia, de Venezuela, que continuamente nos están escuchando, y de acá mismo, de los Estados Unidos, el saludo cariñoso de la Iglesia Refugio del Peregrino para ustedes.
From everybody that's listening to us, it doesn't matter whether you're in Peru, Venezuela, wherever it is that you may be, we're sending you lots of love and a warm welcome from our church.
También tenemos gente en Cuba, la mamá de nuestro hermano Ali, está pendiente siempre de las transmisiones, y otras personas en diferentes sitios. Damos gloria y honra y alabanza al Señor. Amén.
And also a special call out to those folks that are listening to us in Cuba, because one of our brothers here, his mom is from Cuba. So a special call out to you guys, and God bless you.
Como quisiera yo que al cambiar de micrófono también pudiera yo hablar inglés con la facilidad de mía.
He was making a joke.
Salmo 118, y vamos a leer en el verso 17, y lo vamos a hacer bajo la bendición del Padre y del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo.
Amén. So today's reading is found in Psalms 118, specifically starting from verse 16.
No moriré, sino que viviré y contaré las obras de Jehová.
Excuse me, verse 17. I shall not die, but live, and declare the works of the Lord.
Lo repetimos. No moriré, sino que viviré y contaré las obras de Jehová.
We're going to repeat it one more time. I shall not die, but live, and declare the works of the Lord.
Y el título del mensaje será La fe en acción.
Now today's title is Faith in Action.
Damos gracias al Señor. Podemos sentarnos, mis hermanos.
We give thanks to the Lord. Everybody may be seated.
Gloria a Dios. Este salmo, hermanos, algunos se lo atribuyen al rey David.
The psalm, lots of people say that it was written by David.
Otros se lo atribuyen a Salomón.
Others say that it was Solomon.
Otros se lo atribuyen a alguno de los descendientes de Aarón.
Some people say that it was from the descendants of Aaron.
Por supuesto, debió haber sido algún sacerdote.
Of course, it had to be some sort of priest.
Personalmente, yo creo que lo escribió David.
Personally, again, my opinion, it's that David wrote it.
Por la estructura en sí del salmo, como está organizado.
And that's based off the structure, the way that David used to organize everything.
Por las palabras que emite y las situaciones a que hace alusión.
Because of the situations that he alludes to and everything that he talks about.
Y sobre todo porque fue un salmo que el Señor Jesucristo, un salmo profético, y el Señor Jesucristo lo asumió para sí.
Especially because this is a prophetic psalm, and Jesus Christ himself contributed this psalm to himself.
Cuando rememoramos la vida de David,
When we remember the life of David,
voy a asumir que él es el autor del salmo.
again, we're assuming that he is the writer of this psalm.
Entonces, cuando rememoramos la vida en general de David,
So again, once when we remember the life of David,
recordamos que desde muy muchacho él estuvo expuesto a diversas situaciones.
remember that from a very young age he was exposed to a lot of different situations.
Estando muy niño, le correspondió cuidar las ovejas de su padre,
When he was just a child, he was taking care of his father's sheep,
mientras sus hermanos pues estaban en Belén. David le tocaba estar en el monte toda la noche y amanecer y todo el día con todas las cosas que esto significa.
and while his older brothers were off doing older brother things, David himself was off in the middle of the field taking care of a bunch of sheep.
Y eso fue creando en David una personalidad.
And this created in David a specific personality.
La personalidad no es solo la que usted refleja de decencia en la forma de hablar o en modales, en la forma de comportarse.
Now, personality isn't just attributed to how you speak or certain things that you do.
La personalidad incluye la capacidad que usted tiene para tomar decisiones en determinados momentos.
More so, it has to do with how you react to certain situations and how you act on it.
Y eso depende en qué ambiente usted ha sido formado.
And that has to do with the environment that you grew up in.
Nosotros vamos a ver en el transcurrir de la vida de David
We're going to see that in the running of David's life.
una cantidad de características específicas de un hombre conocedor de la batalla.
We're going to see a man with characteristics of somebody who knew of war.
Un hombre sigiloso para andar.
This was a man who was, he knew what he had to do when push came to shove.
Podía estar al lado de alguien y ese alguien no se daba cuenta que David estaba ahí.
He could be standing next to somebody and that person wouldn't even realize that David was next to them.
Y eso lo vemos cuando le cortó la capa a Saúl allá en la cueva, cuando Saúl estaba haciendo sus necesidades.
And we see this when Saul was in the middle of a cave or inside a cave and David came up behind him and cut off part of his cloak.
Y yo no creo ni que Saúl fuera sordo, ni que Dios le haya cerrado el oído a Saúl.
And I don't think that Saul was deaf, nor do I think that God shut off his ears.
Porque eso no lo dice la palabra del Señor.
Because the scriptures, they don't say that.
Dice que David le cortó con mucho temor, le cortó la punta del manto.
No, instead it says that David, with fear in his heart, he still went up and he cut off part of the cloak of Saul.
Pudo haberlo matado y no lo hizo.
He could have murdered him right there, but he didn't do that.
Y Saúl ni se enteró de que David estaba al lado de él.
Saul didn't even realize what was going on. He didn't know David was there.
Ahora bien,
Now,
estar desde muchacho en el campo,
at such a young age, being in a field,
totalmente en descampado,
literally in the middle of nowhere,
le permitió elevar sus ojos al cielo y ver la gloria de Dios.
it allowed David to lift his eyes up to the skies and contemplate the glory of God.
Le permitió admirar las maravillas de la creación.
It allowed him to see the marvelous creation of God.
En las vigilias de la noche probablemente se ponía a meditar y decía, ¿qué es el hombre para que tú lo visites, Señor?
And in his night vigils, I can imagine him looking up to heaven and saying, God, who is man that you can come down and visit us?
Lo hiciste poco menor que los ángeles, pero le diste señorear sobre tus obras.
You made us a little bit less than angels, but somehow you still put us above all of your creation so that we could have authority over it.
Cuando él ve la bóveda celeste, dice de un fin del universo hasta el otro, grande es tu nombre, Señor.
And when he sees sort of like that dome shape in heaven when you look up, he's saying from corner to corner, all of this is yours, all of this is created by you.
En el silencio de la noche, adiestró su oído para escuchar y para percibir el movimiento de los animales salvajes.
And in the silence of the night, he adjusted his how he would listen so that he could pay attention to the animals, how they moved, all sort of rustling in the night.
En la oscuridad, sin las linternas modernas ni nada de esto que en esa época no existían, adiestró sus ojos para poder ver en la oscuridad.
And this was during a time that obviously they didn't have like the type of lanterns or flashlights that we have nowadays. No, in the middle of the night, he had to adjust his eyesight to pay attention to his surroundings.
El frío tremendo que pega en las montañas lo enseñó, le dio fortaleza para vivir en esas condiciones.
Now, imagine being in the middle of this field. It's very cold there, and that type of environment, it made him into the man he became.
El calor, cuando había grandes momentos de calor, le enseñaron también a vivir en esa situación.
And in the same thing, instead of at night, in the middle of the day, that heat, those heat waves coming through, it also formed him.
Muchas veces buscando agua para sus ovejas pasó sed.
And many times looking for water for his sheep, he went thirsty.
Estaba un muchacho, no tenía una esposa que le preparara comida, tenía que preparársela él mismo.
Now he was just a young boy, so he didn't have a wife who at that time solely cooked for their husbands.
Más de una vez tuvo que defender las ovejas de los lobos y de los osos y de los tigres, de los leones.
More than one time we know that he had to defend the sheep from wolves or whatever it was that was out there.
Se adiestró con la honda para lanzar piedras.
Now he had his little, think of it as a slingshot basically, and he would just kind of twirl it around and hit somebody in the head.
Pero jamás descuidó su temor a Dios.
But he never forgot his fear of the Lord.
Todas las vicisitudes, todas las necesidades nunca le impidieron pensar en Dios.
All of the trials of life, everything that he went through, he never forgot God.
David tuvo que haber sentido temor más de una vez.
David had to be physically afraid at one point in time, or many times.
Pero tuvo que tomar decisiones.
But he had to make choices, decisions.
Probablemente al ver venir un león, una cosa de esa, saber que es un animal salvaje, fiero, y tener que enfrentarse.
Now imagine this, imagine sitting in the middle of the field, here's David, and he sees this lion approaching, this literally savage, wild animal coming up to him, and he had to confront this animal.
Pudiendo haber huido y esconderse y dejar que el animal hiciera lo que le diera la gana con las ovejas.
Now he could have easily just run away and hid himself and let the lion do what it pleased with the sheep.
Pero desde muy pequeño aprendió la responsabilidad.
But from a very young age, he understood the concept of responsibility.
Esas ovejas son de mi padre, son mi responsabilidad.
I imagine him thinking, these sheep are my father's property, they're my
Mi
responsibility.
padre confía en mí y mi familia confía en que yo le guardo el sustento de ellos.
My father and my family, everybody relies on me for the substance to take care of these sheep.
Eso formó una personalidad recia en David.
So this made a personality, a very, think of it as a rigid personality in David.
Era capaz de arriesgar su vida por defender lo que él creía.
He was capable of putting his life on the line as long as he was protecting what he believed to be right.
Pero siempre se dio cuenta que era un ser humano y que necesitaba la ayuda de Dios.
But he also always understood that he was just a person, he was just a human, and he relied on God over everything.
En medio del desierto aprendió, en medio de las montañas aprendió a tocar la lira.
And in the middle of this field, he learned how to play the harp.
Y en vez de ponerse a cantarle a una novia o cantarle a cualquier locura de esas, le cantó a Dios.
And instead of singing to a girlfriend in the middle of the city, no, he started singing to God.
Se le conoce como el dulce cantor de Israel.
He's actually known as the, put lightly, the sweet singer of Israel. Or
Preparó
harvest.
salmos al nombre del Señor.
He would prepare psalms for God.
Su gozo y su alegría era expresarle al Señor que lo amaba.
And his joy, his desire was to express to God how much he loved him.
Pero no solo expresarle que lo amaba,
But not only expressing how much he loved him,
sino que él puede decir con plena seguridad,
but he could also say with certainty,
esperanza mía y castillo mío eres tú.
my hope and my protector, that's who you are, God.
Él podía decir con plena certeza que él habitaba al abrigo del Altísimo y moraba bajo la sombra del Omnipotente.
He could say with certainty that he was basically under the wing of God, that God always protect him.
Él podía decir tranquilamente que él salía y iba donde iba porque Jehová iba con él.
He could say with certainty yet again that wherever he went, God was right there.
No tenía ninguno de los libros proféticos que tenemos hoy día.
And he didn't have any of the prophetic books that we have nowadays.
Solamente tenía lo que era la ley y lo que era la historia de Josué.
All he had was the book of the laws and then also the story of Joshua.
No me dice a mí la palabra de que él leyó el libro de Job ni nada de eso.
The scriptures don't tell me that he read the book of Job, nothing like that.
Pero a falta de tener algo que leer, él se preocupó por componer para Dios.
But despite all of those circumstances, he preoccupied his time with singing for God, with making these songs for God.
En la ausencia de material para inspirarse, él se inspiró y Dios le dio revelación y Dios le dio unción y escribió para Dios.
So in the absence of material or inspirational material, he inspired himself, and in that inspiration between him and God, God bestowed upon him lots of revelations.
Pero no se engañe a creer que la mano de David era una mano suave.
But don't think that because of that situation, David's hand was a soft one.
No se engañe a creer que David era un personaje endeble,
Don't think that he was a weak man,
que se escondía quizás atrás de una lámpara y se ponía a escribir.
or that he hid himself in the middle of nowhere and he would just spend his time writing.
No, David se adiestró para la batalla.
No, he prepared himself for war.
David siempre entendió que la vida es difícil y que había que enfrentarla, pero con la ayuda de Dios.
David always understood that yes, life was difficult and it had its obstacles, but with the help of God and our reliance on God, we could make it.
Cuando Dios le ordena
when God orders
a Samuel que vaya y unja a uno de los hijos de Isaí,
Samuel to go and anoint one of the sons of Jesse,
todos los hermanos de David estaban allí.
all of the brothers of David were present.
Ellos se habían preparado para la guerra.
They had all prepared themselves for war.
De hecho, eran miembros del ejército de Saúl,
Matter of fact, they were members of Saul's army,
pero a ninguno de ellos escogió Dios.
but God didn't choose any of them.
Nosotros no tenemos escrito de ninguno de los hermanos de David.
We don't even have any other stories of the brothers of David.
Lo vil y menospreciado fue lo que Dios escogió.
So in other words, the least of them is who God
El
chose.
que dice con humildad, en pecado fui concebido por mi madre.
The one who humbly said, by sin I was conceived by my mother, or through
El
sin.
que los mismos hermanos decían, yo te conozco que tú eres esto y lo otro. El menospreciado, a ese escogió Dios.
So this was the boy that the brothers, his older brothers, looked down on. That's the man that God chose.
Dios vio el corazón de David, un corazón dispuesto a amarlo y a obedecerlo.
God saw the heart of David, this heart that was open and willing to love God and obey God.
Y Dios empezó a prepararlo.
And God started to prepare him.
Cada vez que David tenía que enfrentarse con una fiera,
Every single time David had to go up against a wild animal,
yo me imagino a David diciendo, vengo contra ti en el nombre de Jehová.
I can almost imagine David in my mind coming up to that wild beast saying, I'm going to confront you in the name of God.
Cada vez que tenía que hacer algo, yo me lo imagino diciendo, Jehová está conmigo, Él es mi fuerza, Él es mi escudo, Él es mi adarga.
Every single time, again, this is me imagining, every single time David had to go up against some sort of obstacle, I can imagine him lifting his hand up and saying, God, I'm going to do this in your name. I'm going to do this because you're allowing me to.
Y eso significa que David sentía miedo también.
Which also means that David felt some sort of fear.
Sabía que necesitaba ayuda.
He knew that he needed help.
Cuando vemos el llamamiento de David,
When we see David's calling,
que Dios lo manda a Samuel a que lo unja,
again, Samuel had gone to anoint somebody.
quizás sus hermanos se creyeron que eso era una locura.
Maybe his brothers thought that it was a thing of craziness to anoint him.
David volvió a cuidar ovejas
David literally went back the next day to take care of the sheep.
y sus hermanos se fueron a la guerra.
And his brothers left for war.
Pero Dios, que conoce todas las cosas,
But God, who knows everything,
preparó de que el papá de David, Isaí,
prepared David's dad.
preparara algo de comida para que David fuera y se lo llevara a sus hermanos.
David's dad prepared enough food so that David could go and take that food to his brother, who again were brothers who again were in war.
Y cuando David llega al frente de batalla,
And when David gets to the front lines where his brothers were,
sus hermanos que lo menospreciaron tenían miedo de un personaje que los estaba ofendiendo.
his brothers who had humiliated him or put him down were actually sitting there in fear of this giant.
No tenían el valor de enfrentarse a Goliat.
They didn't have the courage or the valor to stand up to Goliath.
La cabeza no les daba entendimiento para hacer algo contra ese personaje.
They didn't have the mental capacity to stand up before this giant.
Y ese filisteo llevaba 40 días ofendiéndolo.
And this Philistine had already gone 40 days
Y no se sienta mal,
humiliating
hermano.
Israel. And don't feel bad about what I'm
¿Quién
about to
sabe
say.
cuántas veces Satanás te ha estado ofendiendo y no tienes valor para pararte?
God only knows how many times the devil has humiliated you and you don't have the courage to stand up
¿Quién
before him.
sabe cuántas situaciones de la vida te han llevado a doblegarte ante la situación en vez de clamar la ayuda de Dios?
And you only know how many times life has driven you down to your knees and you don't have the courage to say, God, I need your help.
¿Quién sabe cuántas veces ha visto la montaña demasiado difícil de escalarla y has decidido rodearla?
And how many times have you stood before a mountain that you're supposed to climb up and over, but instead, because you're scared, you decide to go around it?
David no pensaba en eso.
David didn't think like that.
David solamente oyó las palabras de ese personaje
David only heard the words of this person, this
que
giant.
le está diciendo, dame un hombre que pelee conmigo.
And he was saying, send me a man who can fight up
Si
against
usted
me.
analiza esa palabra, está diciendo, ustedes no son hombres.
So if you analyze that, he's literally calling them non-masculine, non-men.
Eso es una ofensa fea.
That's an insult.
Y Saúl estaba temblando.
And Saul himself, the king, was trembling.
Saúl, que tenía fama de violento y tremendo,
This was Saul, who was supposed to be the strongest of them all.
no se atrevía a medirse con ese personaje que parecía una estatua ahí de grande.
He didn't have the courage to go up against this giant.
Lo veían como un personaje invencible.
All of these men were looking at this giant as invincible.
David lo vio como sencillamente una fiera del campo.
And David, when he looked at him, he saw him as another wild animal, another wild beast.
Yo me imagino a David diciendo, bueno, Dios a mí me ha entregado leones y osos y cuánta cosa hay. ¿Qué es este personaje?
And I can imagine David saying to himself, well, God has given lions and wolves into my hands. What's this giant?
Pero lo que más le dolió a David
But what hurt David the most
fue la ofensa contra las huestes de Jehová Dios.
was the fact that this giant was insulting God.
Que el pueblo de Dios, Israel, estaba siendo humillado de una forma bien fea.
And the fact that Israel, the nation of God, the people of God, they were being humiliated.
Yo me imagino a David imaginándose como el que va a proteger las ovejas de Israel.
Again, I imagine David as the man who was going to protect the sheep of God.
Él sintió su responsabilidad como israelita a favor del pueblo de Dios.
And his responsibility personality kicked in, saying, I have to protect the people of Israel.
Él no se puso a valorar qué puedo hacer ni cómo puedo hacer.
He didn't start thinking of methods, yeah, I'm going to do this or that.
Él estaba formado para eso.
No, he was already capable. He had the ability to
Desde
do
mucho
it.
tiempo atrás
From a long time ago,
había aprendido a confiar en el que puede solucionar las cosas.
he had already learned to be firm and confident in the one who could solve things.
Y actuó en fe.
And he acted by faith.
Cuando se presenta delante de Saúl,
When he stands before Saul,
Saúl lo menospreció.
Saul says,
¿Qué va a
really?
ser este muchacho?
Basically saying, who is this child?
No, mi rey.
And David said, no, hold up, king.
Ese filisteo incircunciso las va a pagar hoy.
That Philistine, that uncircumcised Philistine, he's going to pay today.
Yo me supongo que Saúl dijo, bueno, un muerto más, ¿qué importa?
And I imagine Saul saying, well, if this kid dies, who cares, whatever.
Vamos a tratar de protegerlo. Ponte esta malla, ponte esta greva, ponte este escudo, agarra esta espada.
And I imagine Saul saying, well, at least let's try to kind of protect the kid. So he gave him his armor.
Cuando David trata de andar, no es él.
And when David starts trying to walk with the armor, it doesn't quite fit him right.
David se dio cuenta que lo están protegiendo con cosas terrenas,
David realizes that he was being protected by material things,
con cosas materiales.
with material things, earthly things.
Él se dio cuenta que ahí no estaba la victoria.
He realized that victory wasn't found in that armor.
David dijo, esto lo que hace es que me estorba a mí.
David said, no, this armor, it's in my way.
Y tomó la decisión que hay que tomar y que usted y yo tenemos que tomar.
So he made a decision, a choice that you and I also have to make.
Yo tengo que ser yo.
No, I've got to be myself.
Tengo que conocerme a mí mismo
I have to know myself
para saber cómo yo voy a actuar cuando vengan contra mí.
so that I can know how to act or react when something comes to me.
Tengo que conocer mis debilidades y tengo que conocer mis capacidades.
So in other words, I have to know my weaknesses and I have to know my strengths.
Yo no voy a cazar una pelea que sé que no la puedo ganar.
I'm not going to go into a battle I know that I'm not going to win.
Yo no me voy a poner los guantes con un boxeador,
I'm not going to put on some gloves and go up against an all-star boxer,
porque la paliza que me van a dar probablemente me mandan para el cementerio.
because they're going to kick my butt and I'm going to go to the cemetery.
Pero si él se empeña en ponerse los guantes conmigo
But if he decides he's going to put on some gloves and fight me,
y cree que me va a vencer
and he starts the issue and he says he's going to win,
y no tengo escapatoria,
and I've got no way out,
no voy contra él en mi nombre,
I'm not going to go up against him in my name.
sino que voy contra él en el nombre de Jehová.
I'm going to go up against him in the name of Jehovah,
Porque yo sé que Jehová está conmigo
because I know he's with
y
me
él me defiende.
and he defends me.
Yo tengo promesa de Dios
And I've got a promise
que
from
aunque yo
God
pase por las aguas no me mojarán,
that even if I go through the waters, I'm not going to get wet.
que pase por los ríos no me van a negar,
Even if I go through the ocean or the rivers, I'm not going to get
aunque
wet.
pase por el fuego no me voy a quemar,
And even if I go through the fire, I'm not going to
y
burn
las
up.
llamas no van a arder en mí.
Those flames, they're not going to touch me.
Yo tengo promesa de Dios
I've got a promise from God.
y eso era lo que sostenía David.
And that's what sustained David.
A veces, hermanos, hablamos de fe
Sometimes we tend to talk about faith.
y yo por la fe, yo por la fe, yo por la
And we
fe,
say, yeah, by faith, by faith, by faith.
pero la fe tiene que traer obras.
But faith has to bring with it actions.
La fe tiene necesariamente que demostrarse.
faith has to, in other words, prove itself.
Y esto va con ustedes dos, hermanos.
And that goes for y'all back there as well.
Dios les abrió puertas, hágalo.
God has opened doors for you.
No pidan
Go.
más señales, hágalo.
Stop asking for your signs.
Vaya en el nombre de Jesús.
Go in the name of God.
Dios les va a dar victoria.
God is going to give you
No se
victory.
detengan.
So don't stop.
Dios bendice al varón y a la varona de deseos.
God blesses the man and the woman of desire.
Dios le dijo a través del profeta a David, eso que tienes en tu corazón, hazlo porque es de parte de Dios.
God spoke through a prophet to David saying, that thing that you got in your heart, go and do it because it's from me.
Todo lo que es para la gloria de Dios es bienvenido en la mano del Señor.
Everything that comes from God, it's backed up by God.
Todo aquello que glorifica a Dios es bienvenido en las manos del Señor.
Everything that glorifies God is welcomed by God.
Dios va a bendecir a aquel que dispone su corazón a servirle.
God is going to bless the one who has a willing heart to do
Porque
things
está
for God.
escrito, el que anhela obispado, buena obra desea.
Because it's written, whoever wishes to be, put it simply, in front of a church preaching God's word, good thing, do it because God's calling you to do it.
Pero también está escrito, pero es necesario que.
But it's also written, but it's necessary for you too.
Entonces Dios pone parámetros.
So then this is when God starts putting parameters or certain things you need to do in place.
David quería salvar a Israel.
Back to David. David wanted to save Israel.
La disposición de su corazón era eso.
The disposition of his heart was to do just that.
Sin lugar a dudas que él veía al personaje y David dijo, no, yo no me lo voy a acercar.
Now, of course, I imagine David looking at this giant saying, I'm not going to go up against him.
Me le acerco, me arranca la cabeza de un espadazo.
If I go up to him alone, he's going to chop my head off.
No, yo no me lo voy a acercar.
No, I'm not going to get close.
Bueno, cuando pasó por el arroyo agarró 5 piedritas.
So what he did was he went by like a little stream and he grabbed 5 rocks, or rocks.
Dijo, bueno, lo que yo practiqué lo voy a poner en práctica ahora.
And he said, well, what I've been practicing in the field, I'm going to put it into practice now again.
Cuando corrí al ojo a los lobos, una pedrada, yo se la voy a aplicar a este también.
So remember his handy dandy slingshot, the same thing he did with the wolves in the field, he was going to do the same thing to this giant.
Esto parece una cosa loca, pero lo dice la palabra.
And this may seem crazy, but the scriptures say it.
Dice que David a 30 metros con la onda partía un cabello.
It said that with his little slingshot, every single time he would throw the rock that was in the slingshot, he could break a hair.
Eso quiere decir que tenía puntería y tenía la vista bien clarita.
So in other words, he had very clear vision and obviously phenomenal aim.
Agarró 5 piedritas.
So he grabbed 5 rocks.
Él sacó la cuenta, bueno, este tiene hermanos.
And I'm guessing he was making some sort of count. He's
Y
like,
son
well, this guy has
grandotes.
5 brothers.
Y son grandotes y feos como él también.
Or he has 4 brothers, and they're just as big and just as ugly.
Pero ellos también se lanzan piedras.
But I know how to throw my rocks.
Y se llevó fue su onda nada más.
So he took his little slingshot.
Cuando el filisteo lo vio, Goliat lo vio, empezó a menospreciarlo,
So when the Philistine Goliath saw him, he started putting him down.
a burlarse y a reírse de él.
Started mocking him.
¿Acaso yo soy perro porque salga para mí con piedra y con palo?
So he basically talked down to David and said, am I a dog that you would come out to me with a slingshot and a little cane?
Yo me imagino, David no lo ofende.
And again, I'm imagining this, but David doesn't insult him.
Si hubiera sido yo le digo, no, yo te considero menos que un perro, pero David no tenía ese corazón.
Jesus. If it would have been me in my carnal state, I would have probably said, well, yeah, I consider you less than a dog, so get with it.
David le reconoció el poder que ese hombre tenía.
No, David recognized the power that this man had.
Le dijo, tú vienes contra mí con espada y jabalina.
And he said, you come up against me with your sword,
Yo no tengo eso,
and I don't have that.
pero yo vengo contra ti en el nombre de Jehová.
But I'm coming up against you in the name of God,
Y yo te venceré.
and I will conquer you,
Y te cortaré la
and
cabeza.
I'm going to chop your head
Y
off,
voy a dar tu carne a las aves del cielo.
and I'm going to feed your flesh to the birds of the sky,
Porque has ofendido a la hueste de Jehová Dios.
because you have insulted my God.
Hoy se glorificará Jehová.
Today God will be
No dijo,
glorified.
hoy te ganaré yo.
He didn't say, I'll
Hoy
beat
se
you today.
glorificará Jehová.
No, he said, God
De Él es
will
toda
beat you
gloria.
today. And from him
De Él
belongs
es
all
toda
glory,
honra.
and all honor
De Él es
belongs
toda
to him,
alabanza.
and all
Él
worship
es el que da la
belongs to
fuerza.
him. He's the one that
Él
gives
es el
strength.
que hace que usted y yo andemos en nuestras alturas.
He's the one that allows us to walk on cloud 9.
Él es el que agiliza nuestro brazo para la batalla.
He's the one that prepares our strength, our arm, to go into battle.
¿A usted no le parece extraño que David, siendo un joven,
Don't you think it's funny that David, being so young,
escogió la espada de Goliat.
He chose the sword of Goliath.
Una espada que era casi tan grande como él.
I imagine the sword was just as big as this kid.
Y bien pesada.
And it was obviously heavy as well.
Pero cuando David la agarraba y daba vuelta y no se le acercaba a nadie.
But when he started swinging that Goliath sword, nobody would get close to him, obviously.
No porque tenía fuerza,
Not because he was a strong
sino
one,
porque creía en Jehová.
but because he believed in
Y Jehová
God.
fortalecía su brazo
And God would strengthen
y
his arm.
guiaba el filo de esa espada.
And he would be the one to guide the cutting edge of that sword.
Y llegó un momento en una batalla
And it came to a point that in a battle,
que peleó tan fuerte
that David fought so hard
que
with
no
that
podía
sword,
abrir la mano.
that it said that he couldn't open his hand,
Se le quedó la
ungrasp
mano
the sword.
engarrotada en la espada.
So I guess he had a Charlie's horse in his hand.
Tuvieron que abrírsela.
And he had to literally get pried off the
Eso se
sword.
llama fe.
That's called faith.
Eso se llama fe.
That's called faith.
Es Dios el que está conmigo.
It's God who's
Y
with
si
me.
Dios conmigo, ¿quién contra mí?
And if God is with me, you're not coming
Eso
up
se
against
llama
me.
fe.
That's faith.
Venga lo que venga.
No matter what comes my way.
Aquí cantábamos hace un rato.
We were just singing that a couple minutes
Funda tu
ago.
casa sobre la
You
roca.
gotta build your house on the rock.
Y aunque vengan ríos, venga lo que venga, tu casa no va a caer.
And if a river comes up against you or whatever comes up, you're not gonna get blown off that rock.
Funda tu casa sobre tu fe en Cristo Jesús.
Make the foundation of your home on Jesus, on God.
Cuán grande sea tu fe, cuán grande van a ser las victorias que vas a tener.
How big your faith is correlates to how big your victories are.
Antenoche estaba hablando con unos pastores allí al frente.
Yesterday or a couple days ago, I was talking to some preachers up there.
Y cuando les di el testimonio de la fractura mía en la espalda y que soy sobreviviente de cáncer, me decían, hermano, Dios sí, hermano.
And when I was giving them the testimony of my fractured spine that was healed and the fact that I'm healed from cancer as well, they started looking at me kind of funny, saying,
¿En
really?
serio, hermano?
They were saying, really?
Más que en serio, de verdad que sí.
And I said, yeah, more than really, it's real.
¿Sabe por qué?
You know why?
No porque yo soy bueno,
It's not because I'm a good
sino
person,
que a Dios le agrada cuando usted confía en Él.
but it's because God is happy and He wants you to
Dios se
have
siente
confidence in
agradado
Him.
cuando usted le dice, usted es mi Dios.
And He rejoices when you say to Him, you are my God.
Cuando usted le dice, usted es mi Señor.
When you tell Him, you are my Lord.
Cuando usted le dice, sin usted yo no soy nadie,
When you
Señor.
tell Him, without you, I'm nothing.
Pero con usted soy más que
But
vencedor.
with you, I'm more than victorious.
Cuando me siento débil es cuando más fuerte soy.
And when I'm at my weakest, that's when I'm my strongest in you.
Porque escrito está que Dios se glorifica en la debilidad del cuerpo.
Because it's written that in the weakness of the body, that's when God glorifies Himself.
Ahí se fortalece el espíritu.
That's when the spirit gets stronger.
Porque cuando usted cree,
Because when you believe,
aunque el cuerpo le diga no,
even if your body's saying
su
no,
espíritu dice
your
sí.
spirit's saying yes, it's time.
Aunque el cuerpo diga ya no más,
Even if your body's saying no more,
el espíritu dice ahora es que estamos empezando,
the
aguántate.
spirit's saying no, we're just getting started. You better hold on tight.
Cuando Elías dijo ya no puedo,
When Elijah was saying, I
ya
can't
veo
anymore,
come y bebe porque el largo camino te espera.
God told him, you better eat up and drink up. It's time to
Ahora es
start
cuando
walking.
vamos a empezar.
You've got an even longer road to
Ahora
walk
es
now.
cuando vamos a empezar.
This is when we're just
Ahora
getting
es cuando hay
started.
trabajo.
This is when we've got
Ahora es
to
cuando hay obra de Jehová.
This is when it's time to work
Ahora es
God's
cuando hay
work.
trabajo para hacer.
This is when it's time for you to really start working it up.
Pararse es falta de fe.
To stop, that's when you're lacking your faith.
Que Dios nos bendiga.
May God bless you.
Que Dios nos guarde.
May God protect you.
Damos honor y gloria al Señor.
We give honor and glory to God.
Cuando dice no moriré,
When it says, I will not die,
sino que viviré.
but I will instead live.
Sin lugar a dudas que el enemigo le dijo te van a matar.
I'm imagining that the devil was whispering, no, they're going to kill you.
Hay mucha gente allá afuera.
There's too many people out there.
Ahí está Saúl y te está esperando.
Saul's out there, he's waiting for
Te van a
you.
cortar la cabeza.
They're going to chop your head off.
Van a derramar tu sangre.
They're going to shed your blood.
No quedará historia de ti.
There's going to be no memory of you.
David dijo, no,
And David said, no,
yo no voy a morir.
I'm not going to die today.
Yo voy a vivir.
I'm going to live.
Y no solo voy a vivir,
And not only am I going to live,
sino que voy a contar las obras de Jehová.
matter of fact, I'm going to tell the glory of God.
La gente se asombra cuando uno dice las cosas que Dios ha hecho.
People are astonished when you start telling
Dice,
testimonies
"¿Verdadita?
of God. And people start saying, really?
¿En
That happened?
serio?
That really happened?
Eso fue así.
That really happened that way?
Bueno, no es solo verdadita y en serio, eso fue así. Eso es más que verdad y eso fue más que así. Dios se ha glorificado.
And you got to get prepared to tell them, no, it's not just real. And it's not just a story I made up. No, this is something that really happened to me because of God.
Y le digo que el Señor, ese fue su salmo de más inspiración.
And again, it said that this psalm was the psalm of most inspiration.
Sabía que subiría a la cruz.
He knew that he would have to go up to the cross.
Sabía que el cuerpo iba a morir.
He knew that his body, his flesh, was going to die.
Pero su espíritu y alma,
But his spirit, his soul, no.
Me dijo, yo viviré.
He said, no, I'm going to live.
Y al tercer día se levantó de la tumba.
And
Gloria a
on the
Dios.
third day, he came back to
Alabado
life.
sea Dios. Y a su nombre. Y a su nombre. Y a su nombre. No se crea que porque Él era el Señor Jesucristo no necesitaba fe.
And don't think that just because he was Jesus, the Son of God, he didn't need faith.
Todo lo que Él hizo, lo hizo por la fe.
Everything he did was through faith, by faith.
De hecho, fíjese que Él, cuando está frente a la tumba de Lázaro,
Matter of fact, remember when he was standing before the tomb of Lazarus?
dice, Padre, yo sé que tú siempre me oyes,
He said, Father, I know that you always hear me,
pero esto lo hago por ellos para que crean que tú me enviaste.
but I'm about to do this thing so that these people over here can believe that I'm here. So this was an
Un
act of
acto de
faith.
fe.
This was an act of faith.
Háganlo todo en el nombre del Señor.
Y'all need to do this in the name of
Hable
God.
en el nombre del Señor.
Speak in the name of God.
Actúe en el nombre del Señor.
Act in the name of God.
Reciba en el nombre del Señor.
Receive in the name of
Y
God.
deje que el Señor haga.
And let God do his thing.
Echa tus cargas sobre el
You need to
Señor
cast your burdens on God
y espera en Él.
and wait on
Que
God.
Dios nos bendiga.
God bless
Nos
you.
ponemos de pie, por favor.
Please stand.
Bendito sea el nombre de Jesús.